This episode is sponsored by DS, a team of makers, marketers, and entrepreneurs that help businesses transform their brand experience and unlock growth like never before. Are you a CMO, founder, or business leader looking to level up your brand and marketing? Head over to weareds.com and let's explore what is next for your business. That's weareds.com. Visit us to learn more.
Welcome to Forward Obsessed, where we talk to breakthrough business leaders and rising entrepreneurs about their journeys, origin stories, and aha moments.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Forward Obsessed. I'm your co-host David Salinas, and as usual, we have an incredible guest for you. Today, Ben Kartzman, father, semi-pro soccer player, an incredible entrepreneur. His story would take us through his upbringing, his soccer passions, which would lead him to Carnegie Mellon, where he'd be told that if he looks to the right and looks to the left, one of those people will likely not make it to graduation. It would put that competitive fierceness into who he is. That would lead him into companies that he would see rise and fall, and he'd make it all the way to the bottom. He'd then work for some really incredible entrepreneurs where he'd learn his lessons. He'd learn things about autonomy, about grit, about persistence, until he finally starts his first company. He would take that to an exit, ride the next company to another exit, and finally land as the COO of a multi-billion-dollar company. You could imagine the stories that this guy has and the types of lessons that you're going to learn from this episode. I hope you enjoy it, and as always, stay forward obsessed.
Welcome back, everybody, to Forward Obsessed. As always, I'm your host, Pete Senna, joined by my co-host,
David Salinas.
And on today's episode, we've got an old friend who's been through a lot of different things. So, Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Good to see you guys.
It's great to have you. So just for the audience, Ben Kartzman, tell us a little bit about you. Like, where'd you grow up? What we always like to do in classic Forward Obsessed type of things is we'd like to dig into like the seeds of entrepreneurship.
Sure.
So, anybody in your family an entrepreneur, like all those kinds of things. So let's find where Ben was born as the entrepreneur. So let's take us back.
Yeah, sure. So born in central New Jersey. So I always joke, if you look at a map and find the center of New Jersey and point to it, that's where I'm from. East Brunswick was the town, and I went to East Brunswick High School, and basically lived my whole life and childhood there.
Nice. Were your parents entrepreneurs?
So my mother was a speech therapist and had one job and worked in the same school district for 37 years until she retired. And my father was the opposite. He's an entrepreneur and had a bunch of different jobs, owned a bunch of different businesses, kind of you name it, he dabbled in it. So, very interesting, set of parents, one very stable and focused and, committed on the one thing that she did for her entire career. And then my dad, who was always experimenting and trying and starting different things.
It's the big counterbalance. I do it in my house. I'm like, don't quit my wife's at Disney. I'm like, don't quit your job. Because I do all the risky shit. And I'm like, one way or the other, if I fall, you got us. So your father, would you say he was like, he was a hustler? He was just hustling his ass off, trying to make it happen?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've got stories of, I don't even know. I mean, there were like when my older brother was in college and my dad was, he was always in sales and doing different sales jobs. He'd owned a limo company in Atlantic City in like the heyday of AC. It must have been in the 80s. And then that took him too far away from us, from the kids. And so I think he wanted to sort of pivot back into something that was, kept him kind of closer to home. And he was always around, always at our sports games and coaching us and that sort of thing. But I remember, going to things like we would go to this like cardboard factory, like in the town next to us, and we would like clean the office there. We used to deliver, newspapers. I mean, like you name it. I mean, we did it depending on sort of where he was or what he had going on. And we were always, kind of pulled into it, or I don't know if we volunteered or I don't actually remember how it went down, but I do remember
free labor.
Being there and being with him and, just hanging out. It's crazy to remember fondly, like cleaning the office of a cardboard factory. But those are those memories for me.
Yeah. I love that. And so was there any moments where you were spending those time kind of seeing your dad's work ethic where it came to mind, you're like, you know what, one day I'm gonna run my own company? Or at that point, had it not really hit you yet?
I don't think it really hit me until I was like through college in the city, working for a company, working for a startup and watching these couple guys that were running the startup and for me, I would said, yeah, those are the guys I want to be. And so I don't know that it must have clicked for me kind of earlier, because I also watched my older brother in the late 90s start a company. It got bought by another business out in San Francisco. He moved out to San Francisco with his co-founder, and they kind of ran that company in the late 90s. So I certainly saw it and was intrigued by it. And I started a couple different things in college, nothing really material or whatever. But I was definitely always intrigued by it, interested in it. I don't know that I ever knew how it would manifest itself. And I'm not really sure in high school that it clicked for me, but sitting here today, reflecting all the way back on it, it all adds up, right? It all makes sense as part of my sort of journey.
Let's talk about something for a second. So one, maybe you're still a great soccer player, but I think you were certainly a much better soccer player when you were younger, right? So it wasn't just college. You went to Carnegie Mellon, right?
Yeah.
One of known for the educational rigor as a university. I mean, again, I've done some work with them. They're just extremely, they produce pound for pound some of the brightest people on the planet, and in my opinion, right? I'm not paid by Carnegie Mellon, just saying that. So you went there and you were playing soccer at Carnegie Mellon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I recall, just in our notes here, you had a pretty prolific moment at a orientation speech.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to just take the audience into that moment. So you're going to school for soccer.
Sure.
Right. And you're in this orientation speech, and just take us back there.
Yeah, sure. So I remember being at school, and whoever it was on stage that was talking to us, they said, look to the person on your left, look to the person on the right. One of those people will not be here come graduation. And I remember kind of being taken aback in that moment. What? What does that mean, right? And what they were articulating to us was, this is going to be hard. This is not going to be easy. This is not a cakewalk. This is not, no disrespect to those who have liberal arts degrees, but that was sort of this is going to be a very sort of challenging, rigorous, technical, 4 years of your life. And I don't think I had any idea what I was getting into when I made the choice to go to school there. But I remember that intensity was thrust upon you from day one, right from orientation. And so I think it was something for me that it just clicked for me. I don't know that I sort of sought it out. I don't know that I knew it was going to be like that. In fact, I'm pretty sure I had no idea. But I think once I was kind of thrust into it and put into that environment, it just felt really natural to me.
Yes. So you said in the pre-interview that it shaped you for a very intense career.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it was the work ethic that you learned in school at Carnegie Mellon. What does great work ethic mean to you today?
For me, I think a lot of work ethic is around grit, right? It's around because there's always challenges, right? Even now, I work in I would say not quite the entrepreneurial environment that I worked in when we were starting our company, right? It's different. It's a bigger business. It's more mature now. It's scaled. But it's still about showing up every day, the consistency of seeing problems that are in front of you and solving them, right? Going after them, right? Kind of whatever it takes to get through that challenge that's in front of you and find a good resolution, right? And I think that the application of that, it's the same whether it is in a 2-person startup or it's in a 2,000 company, right? Those same challenges exist, and I think the way that you can attack and you can solve, certainly the approach will differ because there will be more constituents and different stakes and so on. But I think just the work ethic is really it's just never giving up, right?
Yeah. So how did that shape your hiring throughout your career, and how what are you looking for when you're bringing people on? How do you find that grit?
Yeah, athletes. I mean, for me, it's all about athletes, and athletes does not mean you played a sport in college. That is one type of athlete, but an athlete is, I think of my co-founder, Anthony from SpongeCell. He can wear many different hats. He used to run engineering. Now he runs product, right? He can do a bunch of different things, great in front of clients, right? And so that type of person who can do a bunch of different things, to me, that's an athlete, right? It's someone who can pick something up that's in front of them and just start running with it, right? And so that, when I'm in the hiring process, when I'm interviewing and we were building our team, right, it was, you bring people in, who are the people that are malleable? Who are the people that want to work with you? Who are the people that want to solve problems, right? I think back to kind of work ethic, right? Like the best athletes are the ones that just like they put everything they've got into their craft, right? And I think it's the same kind of thing in business, right? Who are the people that are going to make that commitment necessary to solve these complex problems that are always in front of you?
I tell my daughter that all the time. She made the volleyball team in high school, and she never played volleyball before.
Right.
So started her off with like watch some YouTube videos, learn the sport.
Right.
And then after that, she really took to it. She liked the whole sort of team sport thing, the dynamic, the excitement of the game. And she's like, Dad, I think I want to like pursue this in a bigger way. And I said, great. And I said, you have practice twice a week and you have two games a week. I said, what else are you going to do? I said, it's that else that you do, those other hours that you put in, that will be the difference between whether or not you play this at a high level or you just play it. And I think that's what you mean by there's those types of like student athletes, and then there's athletes.
Yeah. Right. I always believe, I mean, I love that you said that it's not just athletes in terms of the traditional sports thing. You know, nowadays you got esports athletes, I consider myself a coding athlete back in the day. It's like, you know, I've always learned it's not what you do on the field, it's what you do off the field, right? It's those extra reps, those extra practice, that consistent kind of cultivating the craft. Before we go deep down the language of craft, and I could spend 3 hours with you on craft, I want to talk about Seabridge, but I don't want to go too deep because I feel like that in itself could be a 3-hour episode. I want to talk a little bit about, just for the audience that might not know. So at the time you were graduating Carnegie Mellon, it was really like the .com era kind of bubble was coming closer, right? So as you move on from Carnegie Mellon and graduate, what was Seabridge? And take us through sort of the abbreviated version of the story, because I know it has lots of twists and turns.
Yeah. It's funny. So I do some mentoring for some of the student athletes that are at Carnegie Mellon. And I was actually on the phone with a kid yesterday who was a freshman. And we were talking about, he's like, I'm a freshman, what should I be looking at, right? Well, like, how do I set myself up for a great career, for internships or what have you? And I kind of started going through the narrative and the story. And for me, being in school and coming out of school and catching kind of the last wave of the .com craziness in the late 90s, it was really lucky, right? I mean, I think we came out of school, we all had a bunch of different job opportunities. This happened to be the one I chose because it felt like, to me, it wasn't a 3-person startup, but it also wasn't like a big corporation. I felt like it was a 300, 400, 500 people. I could learn a lot. I'd meet a bunch of people. I'd be able to sort of establish my network in my first opportunity there. So we're out of school, joined this company. Things are going great. We're all working on projects. That lasted, I don't know, all of like 3 months, right? And then like market starts to crumble around us. And, fast forward 9 months later, the company had grown from like 500 people. It had gone public. We're like 1,500 people. And then, 9 months later, they laid off like half the staff.
Wow.
And we were then, no longer a public company. We had gotten sold to someone else and then sold to someone else. And by the time I left that company, and so mind you, I graduated in 2000 and I didn't leave the company until the fall of 2002. So not a long window of time to see a company go way up and come crashing down. I was the 40th person left at the company.
Wow.
And I think at our peak, we were 1,500 or 1,600 people. And so for me, that was an incredibly humbling experience, right? To realize that there are forces at work that are much bigger than you as an individual. Like the economy is a really powerful thing and you can't control it.
Why did you stay out of all that? Like either you were hiding or you were super valuable. I have to know.
I was grinding. I mean, I was billable. I was on project. Like it was its only company. So if you were not billable, you were cut. And if you were billable, you stayed. And so
made sure you were billable.
When they came in, I remember, I'll never forget this day. We're all in our office in 40 Wall Street. 50 of us, like from this recent class of graduates, we're in the office, show up to work, and we all start kind of logging on to our computers, right? I'm logged in. I see actually one of my really good friends from Carnegie Mellon who we also work together. He's logged in, so we're like AOL instant messaging. There's one other kid who was like the kid who went to Harvard, like he logged in, and so we're like messaging, and the 47 other kids around us like standing over the cubicles, like, hey, can you log in? Like, what's going on? And we're just like heads down, like we don't know what's going on.
Wow.
20 minutes later, like the head of HR or whoever came from Boston, and basically said, if you can't log into your computer, follow us. And they, took that whole group of people into this conference room, and we like stood up and we like looked at each other and we're like, what is going on here?
They're in the kill room.
And they fired them all.
So that's a welcome to the big leagues moment
Yeah.
for you, because you're like a college kid and all of a sudden you see that happen and it's got to be like eye-opening.
Absolutely.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
We just recently had someone who was with us for like 10 years, a good friend of ours, and he was like, it's time to move on. And he went to a blockchain company. And 2 weeks after he left us, they fired everybody because they got caught up in the FTX scandal.
Oh.
And
They weren't a part of it, just the ripple impact. Just
yeah,
to be clear.
because they're part of the funding circle. If you ever, I don't know if you remember when FTX went down and they were like, here's the branches that it's going to hit, BlockFi, this one, that one. And he literally left, and 2 weeks later he was unemployed. And he was like, and we were like, what the just happened? And it's like that, those are those moments in history where like, it's not quite the .com, it's like the blockchain version of it, but almost, right? It took down a lot of people.
Same concept, right? Is these factors that are just outside of you, and you think, I thought as a kid coming out of school, like I was invincible, right? I'm going to make my career. I'm getting 10 job offers like this. This is going to be easy, right? And within less than a year, you're just okay. Wow. Like there are some forces out there that are just much bigger than myself. And it was, for me, it was super humbling, and it was, I think it helped me in my career.
So I was going to say, you, I think we're going to the same place. So you started in consulting, and you kind of stayed in that consulting mindset for quite some time. First question I have for you is, what made you select consulting? And it was the offer that hit your desk. I'm guessing that might have contributed to that, but I'm just curious, like, what made you choose consulting? I know you studied information systems and human computer interaction at Carnegie Mellon, right? I know that about you. And then, so the Seabridge thing happens, and then A, what made you choose consulting, but then B, like, what happened next?
Yeah. So I think for me, consulting, I always think about it in very parallel to startups, right? So I didn't know coming out of school what I wanted to do. Consulting to me, I felt like you just get a bunch of varied experiences, right? You'd work on a bunch of different projects, and you meet a bunch of different people. And I felt like for me, that would be the closest thing to a startup without actually being in a startup. And I felt like maybe by broadening my horizon, working across a few industries, I might find something that like really piqued my interest. So that was sort of the why consulting for me. But as I sort of grew on in my career and worked in consulting across a few different companies, what I realized and what I learned was there are a lot of parallels, right? Like when you're starting a business, right, you got to build a deck, right? You got to build a deck to like get your team on board, get your idea down, fundraise. Same thing in consulting, right? You got to build your deck to tell your story, to convince your client that like this work that you're going to do is going to be really, really valuable, right? Okay, client signs off, or you fundraise. Okay, now you got to assemble a team, right? In consulting, you got to like go find people who are available, get the best team, get the right resources, and staff them to like go execute. Startups, the same thing, right? You got to go hire, you got to get all the right people and pieces in place, and then the next thing is, okay, you got to start building, right? And so it's kind of like you follow a very similar path, and then you deliver, right? And so like in the startup land, okay, you've built the product, you're like your alpha or beta version is like, you're ready to put it in market. In consulting, like, okay, this is great, we shipped it, it works, kind of hand it over to the client. For me, like in consulting, that was sort of that first phase of it all is somewhat of the easy part. I think it's that next phase where it's like, okay, now like in startup land, we actually got to execute. We actually have to see like, can we get people using this? Can we get people paying for this, right? And I think that's where the real hard work comes in. And so I found like in consulting, as I went through that cycle a few times, it was just missing a piece, and I didn't know what that piece was necessarily until I started kind of putting these two things together. And that was kind of what led me, after like going from Seabridge, I went and I actually was unemployed for a few months. And I remember I went to the New Jersey unemployment office and went through like all this process. My dad took me, and I said to my dad, I'm like, if it doesn't work out, like I don't find a job, like I can't pay rent in the city anymore. Like I can just move home, right? And he said, no. He said, you can't move home. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like,
that's a real G.
He's like, no, like you're on your own. Like,
welcome to the world, son. Figure it out.
Figure it out.
That's amazing.
And it was a huge kick in the ass I think that I needed. And I met these guys at this company called Bridgeline. And there was these three guys in the city. And I loved them. I love like I'll never forget interviewing with these guys, their interview style, the way that I felt being in that office, and being able to like join those guys and go work for them, and realize it, like I wanted to be those guys. I mean, 3 really entrepreneurial guys, sharp guys, sales guy, right? Like a more technical guy, and then a more like, you know, GM type guy. And it was awesome, right? And I loved it, and worked with those guys for a couple of years, and then realized I want to go be them. So how do I do that? And again, I still didn't have an idea to start anything. So I did a total 180, and I went to go work at Accenture, which was the opposite of what I thought my path was going to be. But I felt like I needed to sharpen those skills and like the presentation side and the execution side and all of that. And so I did that.
Ferrari of consultants, right?
Yeah.
No question.
Did that for a couple of years.
I want to stop you for 1 second though, because I'm curious here. I fucking hate coddle culture, right? And now that I'm a new dad, I'm sort of thinking about like, what are the leadership principles that I want to bestow to my son, and like, how do I want to raise him? I'm going through a lot of this stuff, and you know, you're a parent as well.
I am.
So I'm curious to hear your take on this. What do you think would have happened to you had your dad said, "Oh yeah, it didn't work out. You just come back, move home, son"? How do you think that moment would have changed your career had he given you not just the safety net, but really the coddle and say, "Oh, come home. It's okay. It didn't work out." Like, how would you differ in your opinion?
It's hard to say. I mean, who knows? But I certainly, and I don't even know that it was tough love, right? I think it was just, you know, the reality of like, he's been through a bunch of, you know, different jobs and opportunities and things that he's created for himself in his career, some that work, some that didn't work. And I think it was, I don't know. I mean, I honestly haven't really talked to him about it. Now I will. Like, now this has come up. This is sort of making me think that I'd be curious if he even remembered it, and if he did, like what he thought of it. I don't know. I don't know if that was a hard thing for him to do or not. I don't even think it was that hard of a thing for me to hear, as much as it was like, oh yeah, like of course I've got to go do this. And so how would things have been different? I mean, I have no idea. It just, it turned out the way that it turned out. And I think as a parent now, yeah, I mean, that's hard to not want. Must have been hard. I would imagine it'd be hard for me. I imagine, to tell my kids like, no, you can't come home. Like, you got to go figure it out. But, I don't know. I mean, I love that he did it, and I'm fortunate that it all sort of worked out the way that it did.
That's the grit builder right there.
Yeah.
That moment is a grit builder moment. So I want to go back just to Bridgeline before you go to Accenture.
Sure.
You said that they showed you that you loved it. These guys were awesome.
Yes.
They showed you how to build a business. What specifically about them or what they did sticks out to you? Like, if you look back, like, what are the key moments, lessons that were valuable in your journey today?
So the thing that I really learned from those guys was autonomy, right? They trusted me. I remember, I mean, we're talking about this specific type of implementation we were going to do, and I was telling them how I thought we should do it, and they said to me, "You're the expert, right? Like, we hired you because you have expertise in this field. We trust you, right?" And I was like, I'm 23 or 24 or whatever. Like, I don't know any. Obviously, in my mind, I felt confident that I could do it. And of course, I felt like I could execute against it. But at the same time, like, we were working for this big corporation, and I don't know, you know, who knew? But like, either they knew, or they trusted me, or maybe they were just so busy with their own things that they were just like, you got to figure it out. But whatever it was, right? There was a lot of trust there. And they gave me a bunch of autonomy to go execute and to go deliver against what, you know, we told the client we would do. And I just remember that feeling of freedom and that feeling of ownership and how good it felt and how motivating it was. And so that for me was, that was just, I'll never forget. That stuck with me. And I try to keep that, you know, front of my mind as I'm, you know, working with people today.
Yeah. Autonomy is really important. The last thing you want to do is build a culture of micromanagement, and that's the wrong place to go.
Yeah, well, order takers aren't playmakers, right?
Like that. Agreed.
I get a t-shirt. We got a lot of t-shirts coming out of this show.
Athletes.
Yeah. The big question for the audience is, should we start a merch store? Is that something that you want us to start? If so, let us know. The thought didn't dawn in my mind until now, but now I want a t-shirt. So
yeah, I want multiple athletes.
I'm in.
Yeah, we're gonna make a bunch. Every show should spin off some type of e-commerce t-shirt.
There you go.
T-shirt line.
Let us know. There's a contact form on forwardobsessed.com, so go for it. All right.
So then you went to Accenture. which I think you've laid out why beautifully, right? Some people go there just because it's the right thing to do. It's like you leave Yale and you go to Accenture. It's like the path. It's like, but you were looking for something specific. And then you worked with Fred Wilson. Fred, is that Fred from Union Square?
Yeah, I didn't work with him, but I had a meeting just like a meeting with him.
Okay,
that was a sort of a life changing kind of meeting for me, where I went in to talk to him about like, hey, I want to get into startups. I want to get into VC. So I've got this like varied consulting background. Like I think I could, add a bunch of value. And he looked at me and he was like, go work at a startup. And I was like, yeah, but I think I could probably like work at a VC. I could probably do. He's like, go work at a startup. And he just like kept telling me over and over. And probably the 10th time, like it clicked for me. And I was like, shit, like he's right. I mean, that's the only way to really get into understanding what it's like to be at a startup, or to even potentially, hopefully at some point in the future, start something, right, would be to go work at one.
I would agree. I mean, there's nothing worse than talking to an investor that has not run the gamut and like not have been part of a journey. Even if they did it and failed, they don't have to do it and exit. Yeah. But when they don't do it, when they come like out of Yale School of Management or Harvard and they're like, yeah, I work at this VC, and I'm like, what have you done? Yeah. Why should I take any advice from you? You're just reading from a book or some documents or like some playbook that you've actually never ran a play.
I forgot where I read it somewhere, but it was like, if you want to learn how the jungle works, you don't go to the zoo, you go to the jungle. And I feel like that's great advice that you just like, you went to the jungle and you're like, I'm going to work at a startup. So walk us through that path. So you're like, all right, so,
so you're like, I'm not going to go work for one. I'm going to go start one.
Actually, there was an in-between there. There you go. Where I was still working at Accenture, and I actually that summer prior, I actually played for this semi-professional soccer team. And so I talked to my manager at Accenture. I said, listen, I've got this great opportunity. It's only gonna be a few months in the summer, but it's going to require me to like leave work every day at 5 o'clock so I can get to training at night. And then I'll have to take some like PTO days on Fridays to go to away games and things like that. And so this happened over the course of the summer, and I did. It's like shifted my hours, and I worked from like, whatever it was, like 7:30 or 8 until 5 every day. And then I went and trained with this soccer team, and it was an amazing summer. And what I realized, aside from just the opportunity to go continue to play at a high level when I was, in my, I guess, early to mid 20s, not that I had any real aspirations to be a professional. Of course I had aspirations to be a professional soccer player, but I knew that was never going to happen. It was more for like the love of the game and just like kind of capitalizing on being opportunistic, I suppose. And when that summer was over, I was like, wow, I actually have a lot more time on my hands. I could do my full-time job and do it, I guess, presumably well. But I had time on my hands. Like I could do more. And so that meeting with Fred, I think, happened all kind of within the same time. And so I connected with a startup. It was called Decidia at the time, Decidia, and then I changed it to Guidester. It was one way or the other. Joe Chin was the CEO, great guy. And I said to him, I said, listen, I've got this full-time job, but I can leave work at 5. I could be down to you. He had an office downtown at 5:30, and I'll work with you until, I don't know, 10:30 or 11 or whatever it takes. Like I'll effectively, I was like, did like a chief of staff type job for him, right? So it was like I did a bunch of marketing stuff, I do some biz dev stuff, like whatever was required. And so that is how and they were funded by DFJ, if I remember it, DFJ Gotham, if I remember at the time. And so I watched them, in I guess a 20-hour a week kind of job, like go through what they were doing at this startup while I was still had my full-time job. And it was awesome. I mean, I was like mid-20s. I had the time, right? I had no kids. I wasn't married. I was dating my, now wife, and she was understanding of it all. And it was great. It was great. So that was that was the first entree into actually working at a startup, I remember watching when that business was doing well, what he was going through when the business wasn't doing well. And they pushed these like monthly board meetings on him and how much time that took him. And just, I started it was eye-opening, right? Because he was gracious enough to give me a sort of a front seat to it all. And so as all that was going on, one of my good friends from college was starting this company, SpongeCell. And I was like, listen, I don't have a ton of time, but I can meet up with you like Friday nights and Saturdays, and we can
job number 3.
we can like I'll just, as much as I can be helpful, like I'll try to be helpful. And I was maybe thinking of doing something else too. And I was like, maybe you could help me with that, or, just whatever. It was just, I think being a kid and just trying to figure it out there was no math to it, right? It was just like putting myself out there and just seeing what would stick. And eventually, this startup that he and these two other guys were building, like, started to get some traction. And so I started slowing down on all the other stuff and started ramping up more time with these guys. And then we had an opportunity to raise money. And then, so I then left everything behind, and, we raised money, and I went all in on SpongeCell. And we was another woman who joined us as we were the fourth and fifth, co-founders. And that's how it all started.
I want to just briefly unpack your drive, because I think hard work today gets demonized. And I think that a lot of people put their projections of reality onto other people, and it's a lot of jealousy, and it's a lot of thoughts and that sort of thing. Hustle culture is terrible for you. Toxic, toxic, toxic. It's like, I feel like there's an entire generation that loves that word more than any other word in the English dictionary.
But if you pattern match just for a second, you are your dad. That moment, the way you described your father.
I was just gonna take it there. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
You want to take it there?
We're sharing a brain. Yeah.
All right, we can
what
stop.
I was gonna say.
We're gonna record.
No,
it's like you guys have worked together for 20 years.
It's almost like you've done this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to understand the fiber of drive, because, again, if someone's listening to this saying, okay, where do I go and find driven people?
Fiber of
drive.
like
Where is it? Right. You'd say, go to athletes, go to this, go to these different things, look for these characteristics, grit and autonomy and these different things. So lots of gems there. We'll put them all in the show notes. Don't worry, folks. But for me, back then, it was pretty uncommon to have two side hustles, right? Nowadays, everyone's got a side hustle. It's like the thing. But there's not a lot of people in today's generation that, and I don't want to generalize on a generation, but I think we're seeing that a lot of people are changing their identity and the way that work shapes or doesn't shape their identity. So my question for you, fast forward to today, as a parent, we're all parents here now, right? When you look at what you're modeling for your children, clearly what your father modeled for you is what ultimately became your work ethic.
Yeah.
My question for you is, I believe, and maybe I'm biased, I believe it's that drive that makes you successful, and the stuff that we're going to cover in just a few moments, right?
Yeah.
Everyone that's been in that same seat that you're sitting in, and all the other 40 something episodes we've had here, they all have that level of drive. In my opinion, you're not building the kinds of businesses that we seek out to build or that are part of in a 20, 30, 40 hour work week. Tell me I'm wrong, but I'm curious to hear just the question that's buried in there. I know it's a lot, is how do you seek out drive in today's modern economy? And if you were to try to replicate back then, what would you do differently? Big question, I know.
Yeah, listen, I can't speak too much of modern culture, right? And what is good or not good. I appreciate kind of what you're saying. And I can see sort of both sides, the good and the bad. I can only speak to, my own personal experience. And I think about, our household today. So my wife is also an entrepreneur, and she started a business about 4 years ago. And the company's called Toka Builders. And they're basically, they're a firm that goes in and they do massive renovations on super high-end apartments, typically in the city. They do some stuff in Westchester and a little bit in Fairfield, but it's mostly concentrated in the city. And so she is in like full startup mode. I mean, this was her. It was her thing by herself, solo founder, a woman, in the field of construction, which is like fairly unique. And she's just killing it. I mean, she has, and that's a stupid thing to say, but like she really is. I mean, she's got a partner now that she works with, and they've brought on other people onto the team, or people that she's known through her career, and they're building this team. I don't know what they're up to, 10 or 20 employees or whatever they've got now, but they're on this like great journey together. And this is a field she's been in for 15, 20 years, and so she's got all the expertise and the relationships and the know-how. So like that's going on in my house. Plus, what I've lived through. And so my kids who are now, my daughter turns 13 this month, and my son is 8. Like, that's just what they're seeing, right? They're seeing their mother, like, wake up early, like drive in the city, do all this crazy stuff that she's got to do, be on the phone all the time. They're seeing me, the way that I work, because also this whole work from home thing, like my kids will, when I work from home, they'll see me on calls. They'll see kind of the way I work. So they're probably getting more
osmosis,
firsthand exposure at a younger age to what it's like to build something, what it's like to work hard. And they're seeing that, like, that's just our house, right? So I don't know that we're deliberately, like, we talk about it. We think it's very positive for them to see this and to be exposed to it. And I think it's incredible for both of my kids to see, boy and girl, to see both, husband and wife, right? Father and mother, like both equally, contributing to the family in every way. So I don't know what's right. And I don't know what that says about, modern culture, but that's just what it is and what we do. And I watch my daughter now and the way that she works and the way that she tackles like her schoolwork on top of her, like some of the academic clubs she's now getting involved in, plus like all the athletic stuff that she does. And like, she's grinding, and she's 12 or 13. And so part of me is like, I'm really proud and impressed by what she's doing. And I hope that a lot of that, maybe it's innate, I don't know, nature versus nurture. Maybe she just has it, or maybe it's coming from, watching us. I don't know, but
modeled behaviors.
Yeah.
I think that's what I saw. That's why I talked about the pattern. Like as you were talking about that journey,
Yeah.
In my picture, I just pictured like a miner. I just pictured a miner that like works a 9 to 5 and mines the mine. And then when the mine closes and goes and starts mining a different area and just keeps finding, it's like, you're not going to find opportunity unless you mine. Yeah. And I feel like your father was mining, trying to figure out, where am I going to get my hit? I have these skills. I can sell. I can do this. I can do that. Where am I going to get my hit that's going to allow me to be happy, be around the family, make money, take care of the family, feel fulfilled, right? And I feel like you did the same thing. And now you've modeled that. You've done well, and I think now your wife is chasing down that same thing. And also she's hustling, right? Being a mother is a job. It's a real deal job too. And for her now to go down this path while being a mother and raising 2 kids is a hustle. And she got it from you too. And you modeled for her and so on, and you support her. And that's impressive. That's great. I love that. I mean,
it's gotta be so gratifying to like watch your wife kind of leave behind regular job, start her own thing, follow her dream. Cause you've done it a number of times, right? But now was this her first entrepreneurial venture?
Well, yeah, it was, but it was similar to kind of like what you said earlier. I don't know if we were recording or before when you were talking about like, don't leave your solid job at Disney. Like I felt that way. And part of me, when she was leaving her other company, part of me was like, don't leave it. Like you've got this stable thing. What I'm doing is more on the risky side. But at the same time, like we know the sooner you start something, the better chance you have of being successful. So the other part of my brain was like, yeah, like you've got, it's like she wanted to do it. She was ready to do it. And so she had to go out and do it. But it's hard, right? There's never this is the right time to go start something, or this is the right time to leave. Like there's never a right time. It's the moment when you've got to go after it and make it happen. And yeah, I mean, she did it almost against my wishes. But again, that's what makes her her.
It always feels like a house of cards, no matter how well you're doing. Like I constantly tell my wife, I'm like, we're broke. We're going to go broke. and then I look at my accounts and I'm like, and I look at my assets and I'm like, we're not going to go broke. We're good. We're really good. And then all of a sudden I'm like, but in my head, I just always go to, and I think it's part of me. I don't know how you grew up. I grew up poor. So for me, it's always a house of cards, and it can fall at any time because I've seen.
I've rubbed off on you, haven't I?
Huh?
I've rubbed off on you, haven't I?
Not
in a bad way.
No. You're horrible when it comes to negativity, but that's a different story. You become better. But like the truth of the matter is just like, we've been through, once you're an adult and you've been through a couple cycles, right? The .com, the housing, .com housing, right? Now, whatever the hell's going on right now, which we have no idea, you're like, I'm not a dummy, right? So you're like kind of like teeter-tottering on where you are and like, could the house fall down? And I think that's always innate in us as especially parents. It's like, what happens if the house falls down? Yeah. Right. So I think that I totally get it. And my wife and I have those conversations all the time, and I have them in my own head. This weekend, I was like, I'm chasing this fucking ghost. I'm chasing a ghost. Stop, Dave. We need to really think about it. And then Monday, I did the Andrew Huberman. I stared at the sunlight coming up and did my 4-7-8 breathing, and I felt great. And I was like, no, we're on the right path. And that's the journey of entrepreneurship. It is.
Speaking of paths, thank you for sharing that, Dave, as always. So what the hell was SpongeCell? Tell the audience that, because I almost always say SpongeBob. I'm sure you've had that happen a few times. Maybe or not. What was SpongeCell? And
Sponge Ben was what my old investors used to call me.
Nice.
So maybe that happened a little bit.
there you go.
And we met right after you pivoted from the first product.
Yeah.
So what was SpongeCell iteration, and then take us through the pivot.
So you're all in. So just where we're at in the journey, right, is you're now all in.
Yeah.
You've walked away from consulting, and you're co-founder number 4.
Yeah. So we so it was the summer of 2006. Got married. We incorporated the business and raised our first dollar of capital. My wife and I bought an apartment in the city. Right, it all like happened within a 3-4 month window, and so we were off. It felt like a clean break from like one sort of journey, and now sort of on to the next. And so the original idea was it was like an event based calendar. It's what it was at the time. It was a cool idea. We had raised some money. One of our investors was one of the big ad holding co's, and they were introducing us to a bunch of their agencies, and we were trying to sell this in as like an enterprise scale sort of event management platform. And people thought it was cool. Like people were like, "This is great." And I remember going to these agencies, going on this roadshow, and the feedback was tremendous. And I was like, "Wow, this is going to be easy. I mean, we got this," like. And then no one paid for it. No, they were just like, "This is awesome. We think it's really cool. It's super innovative." And they're like, "We don't know how to buy this. We don't, but we want to use it." And we were in this sort of like quandary, right? And so we tried a bunch of different things. We said, maybe it's not enterprise, maybe it's consumer. So we tried sort of releasing it to consumers, tried this sort of a freemium type model back when that was, in vogue, and nothing really sort of clicked. But the one thing that these agencies told us was they said, this was like an ad unit, we could buy it. And we were like, we don't know anything about ads. So we just had to learn. And I remember there was a guy, we shared office space, and there was a guy in the office that we shared it with. And I remember asking like, what are flight dates? Like all the basics of like, advertising 101. And you just sort of we learned our way into it. And then marketers started paying for us to use it. And so we kind of pivoted out of the old event management stuff and morphed it into really a product for advertising, right? So initially it was around like event-based advertising, using a bunch of the same functionality and features that we had built. And meanwhile, this was all happening in the midst of the 2008 crash. So we had run out of money. We had some of our investors threatening to sue us. We had not taken salaries I think we had stopped taking salaries in February, March of 2008 to try to keep the business going. And then we did a first layoff in like June of 2008. We were trying to, scramble money, trying to raise more capital. And by the time the market crashed, whenever that was, October, November 2008, I mean, we were effectively insolvent as one of my investors. So articulately shared with me in one of our meetings. And I said, yeah, we might be on paper, but I don't think we're done yet. And so we actually got an investor who were willing to give us $1 million for a third of the company. And basically the terms of the deal were like, I would be out as CEO. They were going to bring their own person in, and they were going to get a third of the business. And so I brought it back to our team, or my other co-founders, and I said, listen, I'll do whatever. Like, let's let whatever we think we need to do, let's decide together, and I'm on board for whatever that is. And we all decided, like, screw that. We don't need their money. We're not going to give them a third of our company. And we actually think we're onto something here. Like, we can each individually deal with the pain of like not taking a salary. Like, we're just starting to turn the corner here. And so we actually, at that point, we said, no more fundraising. We came up with this mantra. Instead of like trying to raise capital, we said, we're going to try to raise revenue. So it's all about like, we're going to go back and this novel concept of actually trying to make more money than we spent. And
I love that.
Unifying.
Don't raise capital, raise revenue.
Another t-shirt.
Yeah, another t-shirt. I mean, it's important. This is what we're looking for. It's these nuggets, because I think everybody thinks that's like the backup plan is raise revenue,
Right.
and everybody just wants to raise money from
Right.
people and investors, and it's the worst thing to do, because then you have a completely different amount of guilt on your hands. I am curious for your round of layoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just go back to that for just a click. did you do it the same way that they did it at the other company, where you were just like, if you haven't logged in, please follow me?
No, we did not.
How did you handle it differently?
We were small. We were maybe 20 people at the time. And so we just, sort of talked to everybody and said, this is what's going on. Like, we're trying to get money into the business and we just don't have enough, and we're not gonna be able to make payroll. And so, like, this is the unfortunate reality of our situation, is we just haven't hit the numbers that we thought we were going to hit, and we're spending more than we're making. And it's just, at some point, like, we gotta pull the ripcord, and we tried to keep this going as long as we could. And I actually remember, go back to the guys from Bridgeline. I remember talking a story that he had shared with me, which was like post 9/11, they had kept their entire, like, all of their clients stopped paying them, right? But they had kept all of their staff on full time. And he said, we did it as long as we possibly. He said, we basically almost bankrupted the company just to try to keep paying people,
Families
right?
fed.
Even though we weren't making any money. And he said, there's a point in time where, like, you want to do the right thing and you want to keep people employed as best you can, but like the 9/11, sort of element of it notwithstanding, he said it's a really hard thing to do. And sometimes, like, the sooner you make that decision, the better off you'll be, because it actually gives you runway to be successful going forward, even though it will have a materially negative impact on those employees. And I didn't listen to any of that advice. We tried to keep everyone on as long as we could, and we burned through more cash than we should have. And it was what it was. But that was, I guess sometimes you got to, even though the lessons, you got to learn them yourselves, kind of yourself, kind of firsthand. And so, we tried. We were always optimistic, as all entrepreneurs are, but sometimes you've got to balance that optimism with realism. And it just got to a point, and we just kind of were upfront with everyone.
Sort of like the in war, they say just cut off the limb and cauterize it.
Yeah.
Just stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta make that cut. It's hard. It really is hard. I mean, every single entrepreneur that we talk to, it's always the same lesson, which is you got to fire people faster sometimes. And I know it's laying off, but it's like, you have to make those moves quickly. And it's just hard as a human.
Yeah, it
right.
sucks.
And it's, that's part of the entrepreneurial plight, is that you have to be an entrepreneur and a boss and try to do these right things. And you also have this human side of it, which is that you're feeding people, feeding families sometimes, taking kids, they're living in the city. Maybe they got jobs out of college or something, and it sucks.
Yeah. The scars stick with you. I mean,
Yeah.
like layoffs and someone's livelihood, right? So it makes you feel like an absolute piece of shit, for sure.
So then they pivot.
Yeah.
So then the tides start to turn.
Yeah.
Raise revenue.
Yeah. So we're doing it. We're starting to make money. We're making more than we're spending. We're the scrappiest bunch of people like you could imagine. I mean,
That's probably right when we met then.
It was.
You were in the WeWork, right?
It was.
Were you in the WeWork?
We weren't in the WeWork back then. We were, where were we actually? In 2009.
I've seen you in a couple offices.
We've been all over the.
I remember there was one office where you had like an actual floor, like space.
Yeah.
And I remember you had that little stand-up desk in the corner.
Yeah.
Overseeing the whole room.
That was that was the first office we paid for, I think.
Yeah.
Most offices until that we just bummed space from wherever we could get it, honestly.
Yeah.
But we were.
Yeah, I remember meeting you. You guys had a fantastic technology again, you probably still do, but back then, I remember what I loved about you and your team is me and my team. And again, we were really small at the time, so a lot of the ideas we had for new ways to think about what was an ad, new types of experiences. My background's in experience design, so we would come up with ideas like, "Whoa, it'd be really good if when the weather was this thing, we could promote this thing or that thing." You guys were the only technology at the time that did that. You're like, yeah, we can totally do that. We've got this ad unit, this rich media unit.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think it gave us so much latitude. And we worked with you on a number of different big brand assignments from, beverage to all different categories. And I remember just some of the stuff you guys could do with Rich Media was like really provocative. And at that time, like it was like nowadays people are like, what's a banner, right? But back then, that interactive unit, we were building like full on web experiences inside of 300 by 250 and shit, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I would love what you guys did in terms of that innovation. And I'm guessing at that point, you realized that there was a much bigger future ahead of you than what you and the team were in the despair moments of raising revenue about, right? Yeah. So when did that really start to like click? Was it just like clients were starting to see the ROI on those types of units that you were running, or like what was the snowball that ultimately led to, the fast rise?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. I mean, we were doing something that people weren't doing in the space, or we had taken something that was sort of heavy and slow and bloated and expensive, and we found a way to do it better, faster, cheaper. Right. I remember back then we used to talk about like, how did Salesforce get to where they got to? They didn't invent CRM. They just did it better, faster, cheaper. Right. And so that was kind of that was the construct that we were operating against, right? Like what can we do and how can we take what's out there and just like really make it better? And how can we do it so that it's faster, so people with creative ideas can deploy it more quickly? And can we do it at a cost basis that is, more attractive? And so it was a great run. I mean, that run from, I don't know, 2009, 2010, and then we had a couple offers to sell the business in 2011 that we did not take. And then we raised money in 2000 and a little bit in 2011, and then more we brought an institutional investor on in 2012. And then even after that, like 12, 13, 14, we kind of adopted the same mantra. I mean, we didn't, even though we had this capital in the bank, we weren't using it. We actually were still trying to run the business to like profitability or break even or as close to that as possible. Because I think that what we had gone through in 2008, 2009, we had hoped to never go through again. And
get ready for bad winters, right?
Yeah. I mean, that discipline, it was interesting. Even talking about that with our investors at the time, they weren't pressuring us to spend the money, right?
Which is weird because usually they're like, burn, baby, burn.
Scale. Yeah.
But we were doing it, right? We were doing it without it. And I think maybe they were, and maybe our feedback to them was like, listen, we'll use it when we need it. And so that moment actually came in 2015 where we had, we overhired, like I think I don't know. I let it either like go to my head, or I saw a bigger opportunity out there for us that we could go get. And we started hiring like middle management layers, and we started, and I think that led to people on our executive team that were giving me and us advice to, just hire more than we probably needed. And we lost some of that discipline. And I think when we lost some of that discipline, coupled with some of what was happening in the market, that really was a tough, because that was the beginning of our next pivot, right? Our next pivot was away from the sort of like the higher impact, rich media type stuff and into more, personalized creative and using data and data signals to make decisions around like what creative to show people. And we were starting on that path to make that pivot because we thought that's where the market was headed. And it was, we just didn't get there fast enough. And sorry.
No. Like my mind is exploding because I'm a pattern guy like you and like David, and the way your body language changed when you said the word middle management, it wasn't like, I overhired, you were kind of just being, but then when you said middle management, there was like almost like a tick kind of kicked off. And I
think it happened in you.
No, but
I'm projecting.
No, I'm not. No, but you'll see it when you watch the show, right? But seriously, we heard that about an early Reebok executive who at one point they were actually beating Nike for market share, and then they said what he mentioned was middle management came in. They brought in experienced middle managers, and that was sort of the death of that rise. So what I'm hearing from you,
culture killer.
But I want you to unpack that for us again. Now, this is the first time you're a CEO of a company that's raised a lot of capital. You're seeing some nice tailwinds, right? You're pushing forward, and you overhired. Mistakes happen, but you brought in some middle managers, and I want to just have you unpack like what motivated you to bring in those middle managers, and then after you had done it, looking back now, what do you think it is about entrepreneurs when they talk about middle management that like really tweaks them? Because I definitely saw a tweak there.
Yeah, I think for me it was more. You said culture killer. It started to shift the culture, right? Like we were a group of people that I'll never forget it. We were like walking on the street outside our office, and there was a door that someone threw away. And I was like, this would be a great desk. And so we like took it up, put it in the elevator, brought it upstairs, and we set a bunch of books up and put it over these two books. We're like, yeah, we got like a 2-person desk now. Like, this is awesome. And it was just the thing. Like that was sort of who we were and how we operated. We were just really scrappy. And I think because of going through what we had gone through, that was just who we were. And I think when you start to bring in people from the outside that are more professional or maybe don't have that same sort of shared experience that most of the company to that point had, right? They're coming in, they're like looking for a more, I don't know, professional environment or whatever the case was. So I think we just lost a little bit of that
Hunger.
grit, scrappiness. I don't know. I don't know. There's so many factors to it. You can't put it on one thing or one person. The market definitely moved, and we knew the market was moving. We watched the market move. We had a sense of where it was going to move. We didn't react quick enough. I mean, there were some other tangential sort of products we could have built that we never built. There were things like this was in like the flash apocalypse of 2015, I think it was. And all of our front end was built in Flash, and we knew it, and we knew this Flash apocalypse was coming, and we just didn't move fast enough because we were working on other stuff, trying to innovate more. And so there were a bunch of decisions that we made that I think created some challenge for us. To blame it all on middle management would be completely inaccurate and irresponsible, but I think that was one of the contributing factors. And I don't think, to me, that it's middle management. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? I think it's more of like, what's the environment that you set up? Like, how empowered are people to make the decisions that they need to make to keep the business moving forward? And I think in a world where like we kept scaling, we would have been fine. But in a world where some of these market forces started going against us at the time where we started hiring more than we probably should have, it just, those sort of two things together just made it a really, really tough, 2015 for us.
No, I appreciate you sharing that.
It sounds like it's hard to, the lesson there is that when you have multiple market dynamics changing, sort of the tides shifting.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, I would use the analogy of like steering a boat. If you've got the current going one way and the wind going another, docking a boat is very challenging because it's like you have so many dynamics at once that are affecting where you are. It sounds like that's the case. Bringing middle management on is okay. It's going to be a culture shock, which you can maintain if you don't have all these other fundamentals changing with you at the same time. So what did you learn there? If you could go back in time, what would you have done differently? It sounds like you would have tried to pick up on the innovation faster, but
yeah, it's a great question. It's something I've thought about a lot. There are a few things I would have done differently. Certainly, I think we would have moved more quickly on making the adjustments we needed to make to existing products, even though those were not going to be innovative necessarily, right? And I think we would have moved. We knew it was coming. We saw it coming. And I think we would have moved more quickly on that. I think on the other side, I would have tried to keep costs at a reasonable place. Right? We were trying to, for the entire existence of the business, right, post that first pivot, we were trying to keep costs at par with our revenue ramp, right? And that was a hard balance, right? That was a delicate balance. But we had the right people, right? The right people in the org that were like able to work within those constraints. And sometimes that means you couldn't hire exactly who you wanted to hire, but like, so be it, right? We felt like there was a bigger journey or a bigger, sort of outcome that we were driving towards. And I think we lost some of that. So I would have probably maintained that. And then instead of using that dry powder that we had kept on the sideline to sort of shore up the boat in your analogy and like fix the holes that were maybe being created when we were docking it across wind and across swell or whatever, we would have actually used that money. I don't know what the boat analogy is in this case. Maybe a nicer dock. I don't know what it was, but we would have used that money for funding some of the innovation at the same time. So I would have liked to made another like bet or two on some other areas that we saw coming that that ended up being pretty big markets that we just completely missed.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. The reason I went so hard on the middle management thing, I think, was less about like something being right or wrong or binary, but rather like we saw this moment happen, I think, in the past 2 years where like even Mark Zuckerberg and, like made big cuts. There's a lot of talk of like, you look at companies like Asana, which, like see what's happening. A lot of big tech companies, now that the climate shifted, they're realizing that, a good, healthy business is a profitable business. And, that's not the VC world, right? In terms of like, are you building for efficiency or are you building for growth rate or whatever it is, right? So speaking of people that can sometimes show up as desperate. So Yahoo comes knocking on your door, and Yahoo almost at one point acquired you guys. So I'd love to sort of talk about people starting to show up at the door, knocking, looking for a potential acquisition, and maybe you can take us through into that. So Yahoo.
Yeah, so we went through a few cycles of that. So one was in like that 2010, 2011 timeframe. Yahoo was one. There were a few others. And then we went through another round of that in the sort of 2016, 2017 timeframe. So I think the Yahoo timeframe, like the earlier on timeframe, we just felt like, I'll never forget this. I mean, we went to dinner. We like spent the whole day with their team. Our leadership team went to dinner with their leadership team. And then afterwards, we all stood in Union Square, like our leadership team, and we were kind of standing in a circle, and everyone was like, listen, you can do whatever you want. If you want to sell the company, like, that's great. We're not going to get in your way. But we believe we can do more here. There's more for us to go out and accomplish. And so we think that if you sell it, we won't realize the potential. We won't realize the vision of what we're trying to go out and do. And it was a pretty seminal moment. It was a pretty defining moment. And we thought about it, and we made the decision. Like, yeah, no, I think this team is right. I mean, sometimes as a CEO, you've got to go with your gut, and sometimes as a CEO, you've got to trust your team and hear what they're telling you, and listen to your partners and your co-founders. And it's hard when you're in that moment. Like most founders would kill to have that sort of opportunity, but when you're in it, it's a heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching, sort of decision, because it's going to shape your career. It's going to shape the careers of everyone else around you. It's going to shape the future of this business. Like, you'll play the what if game forever, right? And so I think we just collectively decided, let's go after it, right? Like let's, and it was really the team. I can't sit here and take credit for it. It was the team that said to me, like, if you do this, we won't realize what we think we can. And they use some probably harsher words than that.
Yeah. So like, I don't want to work for
Yahoo. We're going to die. Right.
But different time, different era. But they definitely did say, like, if you sell it to them, they will kill this product and probably end the company.
And they were probably right.
Probably, maybe. I don't know. Who knows? But
I've heard many good stories about people.
Yeah. Same.
Except for like Mark Cuban, who did the collar move, and it was like the greatest trade in history.
So yeah, so right from there, we went out. We said, all right, let's go raise money. We opened an office internationally. We opened an office in the UK. Right? We just sort of went for it, and I'm so glad we did. And it couldn't have worked out any better. And that was a crazy time. And then the next cycle was the sort of 2016, 2017 cycle, where we had gotten a few inbound approaches, and I had said to the board, I said, listen, I think as we're going through this pivot, I think what we're pivoting into, like this focus on personalization, is going to be a winner. There's no question it's going to be a winner. Like, if you go, and this is like, you say it today and it's obvious, but back then, if you said, hey, if you could serve a piece of content to someone and it was personalized to them, would they take that over a generic piece of content? Like, everyone to this day, and probably for the rest of our lives, will say all day, every day, right? And so for us, that content could be anything from now to like Netflix recommendations or Amazon recommendations to, the ad you see or whatever the case is. So we were confident in it. We were behind it, but we were just starting to really ramp the revenue into it. And so we felt like we were going to need to really raise capital to go do that. And so I had said to the board, I said, listen, either we can try to raise that capital or we can get acquired. And I felt like we were becoming more of a feature than a business. And so that's okay. It's okay to realize that, because a powerful feature inside, or a powerful product line inside of a bigger business, can be really, really successful. But on its own, it may struggle as a point solution. And that was sort of like, it was not a great era for ad tech, the 2016, 2017 era. And so it was proving difficult to raise money. We tried to go out and try to raise money independently, and it just didn't, it wasn't taking, right? And so I actually got into this, some inside baseball for you. I know you guys want to get into some of the behind the scenes stuff. So we had an acquisition offer from a company. They were private equity owned, and it was like half cash, half stock. And our investor said, we believe the cash is worth what the cash is worth, but we believe the stock is worth zero. And I said, well, I don't think that's true. Here's why. We'll be in as a part of that company. Maybe we'll have some leadership roles. We'll be able to influence it. I don't think you should discount it to a 0. That would be aggressive. And they said, nope, that's how we see it. And I said, okay, so the alternative is to raise capital. I've been trying to raise capital for 6-9 months, whatever it was, and I have failed. Like I have not turned up a term sheet that any of us thought would be of value. And they said, yeah, but it's out there. And I said, it's not. I'm telling you, like it's not. I've tried. Like I feel like I'm well qualified to tell you. And either they didn't want to believe me, or they wanted to believe something else, or whatever it was. And I get it, right? We all want to believe that there's a pot of gold at the end of the
They were
rainbow.
manifesting a term sheet.
I get it. So
You go raising that.
no, they actually said, we'll go raise it. We don't need you anymore. And this was
Oof.
this was the entire board basically against me.
Like
And
no confidence type.
yeah. So I said,
Oof.
wow, all right. So I left that meeting. I went home and I was like, am I out of a job? Like, what am I supposed to show up to work the next day? Like what? Like clearly they don't believe anything that I've said, and they don't trust the sort of work that I've done here. And I guess I've failed and they can do it better than me. So what do I do? And I didn't really know what to do, but I woke up the next day and I went to work and I just kept, grinding and trying to like
Did you sleep well?
I definitely did not sleep well that night. Definitely
So
not.
what does that do to you as a human? Right.
Close your eyes, and every time you wake up, you're in the meeting again.
Yeah, I
Going
mean,
through.
you're just like, where did I go wrong as an entrepreneur? You start to say, okay, wow, so this was I just wasted the last 10 years of my life. Like this is going to go to 0, or these guys are going to figure this out and they're going to figure it out without me. And clearly maybe I've been doing it wrong the whole time. Like all the doubt starts to creep in. Like, even though like, that's not me, I know, I believe I'm self-confident, but like, maybe I've got it wrong. Maybe I have done it. I remember this thought, and maybe I have done it wrong the whole time. That was what was going through my mind. And so I showed up to work. I went to work the next day. And by the way, I told these guys in the meeting, I said, if you go down this path, this is what's going to happen. Like you're not going to nothing's going to show up. We're going to be not only in the same situation we're in now, we're going to be in a worse situation because we're going to need more capital to fund the business to get to this other exit, should we then decide to pivot back to it, if it's even still there. And that's going to cost you money, and you're going to hold that over our heads, and it's going to get ugly. And they're like, no, it's not going to happen. Like, we're going to raise money, blah, blah, blah. So they went at it, and I just went to work. They wouldn't return my calls. I was like ostracized. So I just kind of did my day job of, running the business. And I think it took about 2 weeks. It wasn't a long time, but it took about 2 weeks, and they failed, right? And which is a short amount of time for them to realize that they failed. But I think there were enough signals in market to tell them, like, because who did they reach out to? They reached out to all the people that I had reached out to. I had turned over what I thought was every stone.
How'd you sleep that night? Pretty fucking good.
No, it sucked because it wasn't about me being right. I didn't want to be right. I actually, in a way, I wanted them to be right. I wanted them to, be able to raise the capital. And if I did it wrong, so be it. I should be out of the job, and they should be on to the next person who could get it to the place. I would still be a shareholder, and like I would love for them to be successful, right? And so it
I love
sucked.
that humility. I love that humility.
It absolutely sucked because guess what? We were exactly where I said we were going to be. A worse position than we
At
were.
least it was 2 weeks later, though, not 2 months later or 2 years later.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
so-
It did. I give our lead investor, a bunch of credit for recognizing it quickly. And it was a very quick conversation. Like, hey, we got it wrong. We misread it. I'm unclear if he said you were right. I remember. I remember him saying.
I'm pretty
that.
sure there was an I'm sorry in there.
I doubt it, but maybe. But no, he's a great guy. We're still friends to this day. I'm actually going to see him end of this month.
You
like
didn't think it was fucked up? Did he ice you?
it was. Listen, it's business, man. No, I
But
didn't.
to ice you,
No.
like he literally didn't answer your calls.
No, I did not. It's business, and like they had to make a decision that they thought was they were largest shareholder. They were putting in the capital to keep the business running. If that was the decision that they felt like they needed to make with all of the information presented to them, as a CEO, like you got to live with it, right? You got to live with. I did everything that I could, and I gave it my best shot, and I just didn't I didn't get it right or whatever, right? And
Big of you.
it is what it was. What it was. I don't know that I was trying to be big or small or petty or not. It was what. Because I think for me, I know for me, I still thought there was a positive outcome for us, and I still wanted to be a part of that.
Mhm.
And I felt like I was the right person to drive it there. So I still wanted it to get there. So when it did get there and got there fairly quickly, there was no, I mean, what good would that have done me to have been like, you guys wouldn't have accomplished anything, right? Maybe feel good in a moment, but I think it would have taken away from the longer term goal
Absolutely.
that I had, which was to get to this ultimate outcome.
Mhm.
So what happens at that point? So now 2 weeks goes by, the conversation happens, the unspoken kumbaya happens, and then what's next?
So then we're like, all right, great. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna hire a banker, and we're going to talk to some other companies, and we're going to
Sell our feature to someone who can use it.
take this deal that we've got, and we'll see if we can make it better. And that's what we did. And it was a crazy journey. I mean, it was that first company, I think, came back through 2 or 3 times, and we had some other parties that got really interested. And I remember being out at Demexco, which used to be this big like ad tech conference in Cologne, Germany, going from like booth to booth, like basically like having like different meetings with potential suitors, like who had expressed interest, and all of that great work that we did, the banker, everything, this, that, the other. At the 11th hour, one of our biggest competitors, which was FlashTalking, I get a LinkedIn message from the head of Corp Dev saying, "Hey, our CEO wants to meet with you." And I was like, okay, I kind of knew why and what was going on, but we had not reached out to them. I had never really thought they would be interested, or we would get them to a place valuation wise that would make sense. I don't know why. I don't know. And so he reached out. We met. We had lunch, and I didn't know him at all. John Nardone's the CEO, but he was awesome in the meeting. He just said, "Listen, I think you guys are clearly doing a good job. You're winning a bunch of clients. Your product is resonating in the market. We also know that you're about to get acquired by this other company, and we would prefer if you didn't get acquired by them, but you joined us." And he said, instead of us like fighting each other and just sort of undercutting each other on pricing and trying to out innovate each other, why don't we join forces? And financially, it's like a more sensible thing to do. And so we walked through what that would look like and how that would work. And I didn't know him at the time, but what I say now, what I've said sort of post deal, is everything he represented himself to be in those deal conversations is exactly who he was sort of post deal when we started working together. And so he really set a great foundation for what the relationship would become. And we worked through it together, and turns out they made what we felt like was the most attractive. We all felt like it was the most attractive offer. It wasn't the highest amount, like there was the other one that I had mentioned earlier. If you don't discount the stock to zero, I think was more attractive. But this was, we felt like it was just a good opportunity.
What happened to the other company?
Went bankrupt.
So it's funny. Everybody I talk to that does a stock deal, I mean, including the famous story of Mark Cuban and the collar, he had a feeling that the stock would go to shit, and he bet that collar and made a little bit of money. But most people, they take the stock and the stock goes to nothing. Happens more often than you realize. I think that's why they just auto discount it. Like, okay, great, stock's worth nothing.
So they were right on that one.
Yeah.
And I did tell them they were right. And I thank them and my co-founder who was in on that call for sure.
So I have to ask this question because you're in the due diligence process. You're meeting bidders.
Yeah.
You're talking to people. They're trying, there's a romance to it all. And quite often it turns out to be shit, and it turns out to be a bad situation.
Yeah.
Looking back at that conversation with that guy, is there anything you can identify today, the CEO of FlashTalking, you can identify today, which was the signals that made you, that would make you realize that was a good guy to partner with and to become, and to sell your company to?
So there were a few things in the meeting. First of all, I felt like he was being transparent. He also knew the market well. He knew the clients that we had beaten them out on. He had some information as to like why we had beaten them out.
Smart, intelligent guy.
He had
did his homework.
He had a good plan. He said, listen, I've been on the good side of deals and the bad side of deals, and I've done 10, 11, 12 deals in my career. And so he's like, I think I've got a sense of how he would do this. And so he was he gave me a lot of confidence, right? And then I think the thing that he said to me was, he said, listen, I need another CEO in here. He said, I need someone in here who can look, act, think, make decisions, move quickly, like I'm sure you do inside of your business. He said, I've got, we're moving too fast. I've got too much on my plate. And, I think if it worked out, like, we could be great partners.
Autonomy.
And
he's like, I need somebody to yeah.
Exactly. And so I think I'd never made that connection until right now in this moment. But, I know a lot of what you guys do is sort of thinking about like all the stuff that happened in our collective histories and how it's influenced the decisions that we make today. And I think that is exactly what attracted me to it. Absolutely.
It's forward obsessed, baby.
So
that's all. And then, so now you get acquired. Your investors got out. I'm assuming with the shirt on their back, at least.
So it was a very interesting deal. We, the debt guys took the cash,
yeah,
and then the rest of us rode. So the rest of us it was all stock.
Yeah.
And so the difference between this deal and some of the other deals was that these guys were backed by TA Associates, private equity firm, and the valuation was very realistic. So there were some other companies we were talking to who were private, and where we were talking, not the one that I'd mentioned earlier, but a completely different one, where they were trying to put a valuation on themselves at this like way higher number than they had ever raised money at. They were just telling us, in the next 6 months, we will raise money at this valuation. So we're going to buy you for stock at this future price. And we were like, what? Like, this is just...
Can you just bend over and grab your ankles, please?
backwards. And so whereas these guys, again, very practical, very direct. Nope, this was the price of our last round. This is how we value ourselves. This is how we look at you guys. We'll give you the same multiple of revenue that we give ourselves. And it's a very clean, easy kind of deal.
Transparent and honest.
It was very direct. It wasn't trying to over optimize.
You felt like a partner out of the gate.
And that's how I approach these types of deals. I'm not an over optimizer. I'm very practical. If I want to get something done, I look at like what is that other party trying to solve for? What are we trying to solve for? And how can we get those two ideals together as close as possible, and then just go make it happen. And that's how he approached it. And so I think that resonated with me as well. And it was fair. It was equitable.
I win, you win.
I actually, so just again, pattern recognition. Yeah. I remember that about you when we were your client. I remember how you were like putting the pieces together, and you were transparent and like what you did, and like because we were trying to do shit that you had not done, but you're like, I think we could do this, and like putting the pieces together. So it's a through line with you, clearly. Yeah. Like I have these flashbacks and memories of that and that relationship with you. So now, if it wasn't for that, you think SpongeCell would have made it?
We would have ended up somewhere. Absolutely. Yeah. Because our investors were funding it, and we would have gotten it to a home, unquestionable. I think I didn't know it at the time for sure, but the way things played out, this was the absolute best outcome we could have gotten to. I think they ended up being, I'll never forget it. We closed the deal on the 27th of January, 2018. On the 28th of January, they had a sales kickoff meeting. And so they had their 40-person sales and account team, or whatever it was, 50-person team in this like office room in Midtown, and me and like a few of us, we go in there. We're like, what? Because we didn't really know these people. We just knew that we had competed with them. Yeah. And so we were like, what are we going to fight?
Standoff, yeah.
It's like, what's going to happen? And we walked in, and they were amazing. They were gracious. It felt like, I'm like, wow, they're just like we are, right? We're trying to attack problems in the same sort of pragmatic approach. I was able to get in front of them and talk about some of the things that we had done. They had a bunch of questions for how'd you win this? How'd you win that? What was your approach here? And it was just like right away, hyper collaborative, very inclusive. So the cultures really meshed. And that's when I sort of felt like, all right, like I think we can, everyone says, we'll put these two companies together, 1 + 1 = 3, right? I felt in that moment like we actually had a chance to do that.
So do you think it was accidental that this all came together, or do you think, like, now looking back, are you saying it like it made sense given the autonomy, the transparency and honesty, the way you do business, and all of those things? Like, it just happened to be magic, or like how would you serendipity sometimes?
That's a good question. I think it's going to be a little bit of all of it, you know. Certainly like right time, right moment, right place. But also I think it's like, yeah, we were attracted to each other, even going through the deal. And like these guys, so they had an office in South Norwalk. And so I was able to drive over to their office, like probably, yeah, I remember being with them pre even signing the LOI and just being able to be in the office with the CFO and be like, all right, like we're going to put this in the term sheet. This is how it's going to look. And he'd look at me and be like, what do you mean? And I'd be like, no, I've already talked about it with my board. Like, it's all good. And he's like, all right, if you say it. And like, there was that level of trust without even really knowing each other. And then obviously I was working with them a bunch, calling the CFO on the weekend because, you know, December, we were supposed to sign this deal like December 23rd or something, which, you know, the naivete of the entrepreneur thing. Like, oh yeah, we can get a deal like this closed in 3 weeks. Yeah, no problem. Like we weren't even close. Right. And I remember calling him and like that weekend before, be like, hey, is it going to happen? And he'd be like, well, you know, we're going to try. I remember like Christmas Day, like checking my email, and it took us a whole nother month removed from that. And that's a hard time as an entrepreneur because you've made the commitment, right? Like you're in exclusivity. You've pretty much like stopped talking to the other suitors. Like
it's purgatory.
You're down the path. And if this thing doesn't close, wow, right? Like what are we going to do? But again, they were always open and transparent. There was some stuff on their end, like people that needed to sign the deal that were taking a little longer to get signatures. But they wanted to do the deal, like we wanted to do the deal. But that was a tough month to sort of reconcile, like, because you're also sort of like you're like helpless, right? I mean, what could I do to push this along? And there really wasn't much. I mean, there were some things we needed to do on our side, which I did and I worked through, but that was also painful. But these deals are always, they're not without pain. But I think, you know, I don't know, to answer the question, it definitely all came together for a reason. And again, being on the other side, once we did get the deal done, it just like the teams just meshed, you know?
So I'm sure by this point that the people that are listening are like, all right, what the fuck happened next? Right? Because you paid off your debt. Yeah. You got a stock deal. So that means you're not out, you're exited, which is great. It looks as it's an exit on your book, but no one's really out yet. Now you got to go and you're working right back to literally the next day. You're right back at it. Yeah. You know, new team, new dream. Yeah. You know, new team, same dream. New team, same dream. New title, but you're acting as a CEO still. So you're a big decision maker. You're a partner to this guy.
But definitely the COO. Very clear he was the CEO, and it was clear there was one CEO, and that was good. He made it very clear how the org was going to be structured, and I was now a part of that management team or that executive leadership team. And so again, there was an adjustment in that, but I was eyes wide open, and again, he was very transparent about it. So everything that I walked into, I felt really well prepared for.
So now you would build up the team from there. I'm just going to get to the punch, right? Yeah. You go and sell this thing for half a billy. Yeah. Half a B.
Yeah.
One thing that I read in the interview notes, was the bidding process. Yeah. To sell the company. What is that like now that you've sort of went through it? Yeah. And now you're doing it on a grander scale where you're selling a company for, you know, you're trying to maximize value. This is your exit. Yeah. Assuming you did some type of cash and stock deal to get out of that one too, I'm assuming, or was it? Yeah. What's the bidding process like? Like, what are you looking for? Like when you go into these things, like what is the mindset that you have when you're meeting these people? And I'd imagine the CEO's leading, but you got to be there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's that like?
It's fun. Yeah, it's really fun. Yeah, I mean, you get the opportunity to go through a real formal process. We were growing really nicely. I mean, we had taken that business together at like 50 million in revenue, and we were, you know, going to be doing 100 million in three and a half years. And so like really, really nice growth, EBITDA positive. I mean, it had all the financial rigor and discipline of a private equity owned business. So not only were we growing revenue, but margin, we were expanding margin, and we were doing everything that we needed to be doing. We were also at the same time, right, like the two product teams had come together. And so there was innovation on the product side. These guys were already rebuilding a bunch of and re-architecting a bunch of code that when we got there, they were releasing and putting into market. They took the stuff that we were working on, we coupled it with the stuff that they were working on, and we came up with like the 2.0 of like the best of breed of both businesses. So we were executing against all the things that we kind of felt like we needed to. So I think when you go into these situations now with new potential owners, you have the win in your sails, right? And so we had a lot of confidence to say, hey, listen, first of all, we don't need to do a deal, but we feel like there's opportunity here, right? So for us, the types of deals we were looking at were either strategic, which is where we ended up, or another private equity, which was, okay, we have this platform and we now have the opportunity to bolt on some other things onto our platform and then scale it and make it even bigger, right? And go, the next one had to be, $1.5 billion or $2 billion or whatever it was. So I think we felt like we had a good plan. We had put a lot of time, effort, and energy into it. Our team was fantastic. I think that's the thing I haven't hit on. So I'm gonna sidetrack a little bit and then we'll come back to the deal.
We'll bring it back.
I cannot overstate the importance of team and all of this. And so I feel really lucky because when we went from SpongeCell to FlashTalking, like not all of us came. So like our CTO and our CFO/COO, the CEO of FlashTalking was like, listen, we don't need two CTOs and we don't need two CFOs. And I said, I hear you, but these guys are awesome. And he's like, I'm sure they are awesome and I don't doubt it. But like from a financially responsible perspective, we have to make some decisions here. And so like that was my first sort of entree into, okay, like this is going to be a little different than the venture world. But the rest of our crew, the rest of our executive crew from SpongeCell that came in, right, embraced by the FlashTalking team. And now we join and we're a part of this. Like we've got this bigger team right now. So now I have new teammates, right? I have more people that I can work with, that I can trust, that we can sort of build and grow and scale together. And so we do that together. And then we go through and we get now on the other side of Mediaocean, and it's the same thing. Now we have, again, new teammates, right? Like new people that are helping us continue to like realize the vision and help grow and scale it bigger. And by the way, all of those people that were with us from SpongeCell still with us today at Mediaocean. A lot of people from FlashTalking, like our senior leaders, still with us today. Some have left. Again, the poor CFO from FlashTalking, just like CFO from, I don't know what it is for the CFOs, but I feel bad for them because they're so
CEOs have to trust the CFOs.
Yeah,
that's the relationship.
Right, they're so counted on, but they often don't get to carry through in these kinds of deals. So not everyone came, and that's tough. But a lot of the folks that did come on, and some people left by choice, others by sort of it was just part of the deal. But to be on the other side of it, it's kind of with your team and with people that you've grinded on this thing through, some for 10 plus years, some now for like 2 years post Mediaocean. It's awesome for me to see it all come together and see everyone works well. And so I think when you break that back into, and I'll segue back to your question, right? Like going into these conversations with our team, with our deal team, and knowing that like we feel really good about it. Like we feel like we have the best team in the industry. Is it true or not? Who knows? There's plenty of great teams in the industry, but that's how we felt about ourselves. And so when you get in front of these investors or potential acquirers, these are people that have spent a lot of time in our space. They've talked to lots of management teams in our space, right? They can get a sense for, I don't know, I would imagine they can get a sense for who's good, who's not good, who's got a good business, who doesn't have a good business, right? I would imagine they could sense that. And so for me and for us going through that process, being able to give these presentations, and yes, our CEO led these presentations, but there were definitely like areas where like he would hand it to the CFO, or he'd hand it to me, or he'd hand it to our CTO, or he'd hand it to our CRO, right? Like we all kind of played a role in telling our story and getting these new, investors or acquirers to get to know us.
Most of the people that we have had on the show don't last as long as you have lasted through the acquisitions. It's usually they get acquired and it's either they get the check, the wire hits, as we always talk about, and they're out.
Yeah.
Or they go on to an earnout for a period of time and they either earn out or burn out, right? Because it's just like not
Another t-shirt.
Yeah, earn out or burn out. Put it on a thing. Every show we're gonna have like, these are the t-shirts. We should have people vote on it. That's a good idea. Rob's like, I don't need another fucking job.
Rob's like, I don't want to run a merch store. I used to be an artist.
Yeah, whatever. We're gonna do it anyway. But you've made it through. You continue to push through. You're holding your position, right? You're CEO, COO again.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, how did you stay on? Like, because Mediaocean's a huge organization, right? How much is Mediaocean worth?
I mean, it's multiple billions.
Yeah.
Valuation. Yeah.
And you're the COO of the company.
Mm-hmm.
How does that feel that you're sort of maturing through this cycle from like startup CEO to like private equity owned COO, and then now you're a COO of a multi-billion-dollar company?
It feels supernatural.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I still really enjoy what I do. Like I said, I get to work with people that I really enjoy working with, right? And some of whom I've hired, some of whom I inherited, some of whom who were there, some of whom were part of a deal, some of, and so I feel really lucky that I've gotten to work with great people. And I also think we've got a big opportunity still, right? I felt like if I were to sit here and say, no, like mission accomplished or whatever, like we set out to do what we set out to do, like I would think that we've gotten to a point in the product where there's no more innovation. And I've been joking with my co-founder, Anthony, back from SpongeCell, who's now the head of product in our FlashTalking business at Mediaocean. And like every year, there's more stuff to do than there was the prior year. And that to me tells me, and I think tells us, that there's still room for innovation. It's an industry that's like constantly evolving. And so I think it's still, even though I've been at it for a while, it's still fresh and it's still interesting. And I think going to these different organizations just creates new challenge as well. Right.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge now being inside of Mediaocean, that I spend most of my time on the FlashTalking business, it's a different set of challenges, right, than it was when we were at FlashTalking and then versus when we were at SpongeCell. So I think for me, each leg of the journey just represents something new and interesting. And being here is no different, right? Now we're part of this bigger business of Mediaocean, and that's a real benefit to us, right? And so while we were going through the deal process, to end up with Mediaocean, we felt like had the potential to be a real win, because they had a few assets. They had a social business that was the next thing we were going to build or most likely buy if we had stayed independent. And they already had it. So we were able to kind of theoretically shortcut that and begin the integration process, right away together. So I think for me, like the opportunity is still there. The team is still there. Which
CEO
is
of FlashTalking stayed?
He just left.
He just left.
Okay. He just left.
So tell me something.
Yeah.
You're watching your wife have the pivots, the pitfalls, the ups and downs of business. You're watching her build. Do you miss being a startup CEO?
Parts of it, for sure. Parts of it. And parts of it, I don't know. I mean, some of it, like having to go meet one of my investors at Bank of America so he could take a check out of his personal account to give to me so I could put in our bank business account the day before having to run payroll. I don't miss that. That wasn't that fun. As much as I love that investor and as great as it was when we exited and he made money on the deal, like as wonderful as that was, like I don't miss that side of it at all.
What do you miss?
Yeah, I mean, I miss a little bit of that. Like you're trying to figure it out, right? Like you're in the early stages, right? You're putting ideas against the wall, trying to see what sticks. But I still feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I still feel we have a lot of that energy here. Because we're still trying to bring new products to market. We're still trying to like win new customers. We're still, even though there is a market that exists and we've got a bunch of the market share, we're still fighting to beat Google, right? We're still the little guy, right? So I still feel a lot of that energy, even though there's some parts of it that I don't have anymore.
Right on. I would ask you what's next, but it feels like what's right.
Yeah. Do you have any side hustles? Tell us. What are you doing the last 20 hours of the day? 20 hours of the week.
Nothing with work. Nothing with work. It's pretty all in and focused here. I definitely advise some startups for sure, but that's not a massive amount of time.
Yeah.
But it's my kids. It's like I'm a Uber driver. I'm a third grade boys basketball coach. Yeah, I love it. So it's all those other sort of passions that I have now that I get to do. And I'm on a sports field with them every weekend, and or instead of a pool with my daughter, you know, watching her swim. And so it feels like it's a great balance. And I, like you said, I do get to watch what my wife is doing, and I'm involved in that, you know, like I don't work in it at all. Right. And I couldn't like show up in a day and actually help them like I would like fail miserably at that. But yeah, when she's kicking around ideas, I was on the phone with her today, come over to see you guys, and she's just had a big client meeting and she's working through like what's next. And so I'm invested in her, you know, as much as I was ever invested in myself, if not more.
And the tables have turned. Your stability now.
Yeah.
You're at a multi-billion-dollar company as a COO in a stable position at a stable organization, and she's on the risk side now.
Yeah.
So the tables have turned in a nice balanced way. Well,
where do folks go to read about your journey? I know I don't see you posting a whole lot on different places.
Yeah.
You're sort of the stay focused and building kind of person. But
SpongeBen is gone.
SpongeBen's gone.
We want SpongeBen back.
Any URLs you want to plug for the audience, or anything that if folks want to get in touch?
I mean, I will post stuff on LinkedIn for sure. Things that I think are interesting, or things that I'm doing, but that's probably the extent of it. There's not I don't have time or interest for Instagram or I mean, a little bit of Twitter, but this too much negativity on Twitter, man. I can't handle it.
Before we leave, I want to, because we loved ad tech for so long.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, cause just having an agency, knowing where ad technology was going was always important for us, because it allowed us to sort of at least excite our clients or potential clients. Obviously, we had lots of friends in the ad world. We met through Tim, who's at Meta now, and we knew lots of people. It feels like the ad tech world has gotten really sleepy, though. Like this, you don't hear a lot of there's no funders. Venture capital has sort of dried up in that space. Like, what's the future of ad tech look like? If you could start up today, where would you go?
There's a lot still happening in ad tech. I mean,
really?
The Imperium Ventures, which is the old CEO from MediaMath, and the old
MediaMath imploded, right?
They did, unfortunately, but Sawadsky, great guy. He runs this with Eric Franchi, who's been an ad tech guy forever. He was one of the co-founders of Undertone, and those guys have been investing in ad tech stuff for years, and it's just different now, right? It's not. It was, you know, we always talked about ad tech across like, what inning was it in baseball, right? And when we met each other, it was like the first, second inning, right? Like. Now it's mature. I mean, we're in like the seventh, eighth inning of ad tech, right? And so it's like, who's going to win? I mean, Google's won, right? Like Facebook is won, Amazon is winning, and it's like those three guys.
Amazon is ridiculous. $14 billion a quarter from advertising.
Yeah, their media business is massive. Trade Desk has been the sort of the lone star of independent ad tech, and they've executed incredibly well. I think for where we sit as Mediaocean, I think we've got a great business that's still, you know, both on the FlashTalking side and on the Prisma side, and we're a pretty scaled player. It's not like it was. I mean, in the first inning, second inning, there's people throwing stuff against the wall, seeing what sticks, right? And like, it's more mature now, right? So it doesn't mean innovation is not happening, because it is. It just doesn't mean there's as many, you know, startups getting funded as there were.
On that note, we want to thank you for coming on Forward Obsessed, my friend. It was great to catch up and hear the whole story, because obviously we have never heard everything. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Stay Forward Obsessed.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Forward Obsessed. Please share this episode, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast app. If you have feedback or suggestions for our next guest, visit us at forwardobsessed.com. If you want to dive deeper into every interview, subscribe to our Substack at forwardobsessed.substack.com. Also, find us on Instagram or TikTok at forwardobsessed to see all the best moments from every episode. This episode was produced by Robert Roach from District Studios in New Haven, Connecticut. If you would like to learn more about the team that makes this show possible, visit digitalsurgeons.com.